I can see nothing, so I'm assuming it's all my best friends out there. Thanks, guys, for coming. Before I get into my presentation, I did feel some responsibility being coming up first. I just want to recognize that, this isn't fact-based, this comment I'm about to make, but just vibes-based. It's hard in our industry for a lot of people right now. And I just want to kind of recognize that. There are a lot of people who are looking for jobs and dealing with a lot of rejection, and there's a lot of people who are not happy at their job but feel like they can't go anywhere else. There's a lot of people who they think that they need to make a change in their career, and they're not sure how to do that. I don't have solutions for those things necessarily. I just want you to know that I've experienced some of those things, and I do know that the importance of community, of chatting with each other and not feeling alone is super important. So I'm really grateful that we have events like Front, and I'm really glad that you're here. And if you have anything that you want to talk about, chat with your neighbors and chat with me and meet some new people, because I will say, all my best jobs and job changes have come from doing things like events like this. So I'm really grateful for Front and everything that they're doing for this community. All right, introduction. So I'm Garth Braithwaite. I work at Adobe. I'm a design system engineer. I've been there for 13 years, but I started as a senior experience designer, and I've been doing design systems since Spectrum really started. I was probably number 2 or 3 added to the product. It's a design system. But I kind of jumped between design and engineering my whole career, and I feel like I have my forever home in design systems, so I feel really happy being there. I missed the whole poll that they did with trying to figure out how many of you are doing different roles, and that's fine, I won't make you do that again. But I am curious, is anybody in here currently working, you personally, full-time on a design system? Yes, I love you. All right. Anybody here using a design system that's provided to you? Okay. Anybody here really wish you had one, but you don't? Okay. All right. So this is a little bit for you guys too. So Spectrum. Spectrum is Adobe's design system. It's not Adobe Spectrum. It's Spectrum, Adobe's design system. Branding's important. I primarily focus on design data and how design and engineering collaborate together, and that's literally talking about getting the people together, but also around getting the technical infrastructure and getting the data shared between these groups. Adobe is a very large company, and we have a lot of products, and we acquire new products, and they all have very interesting ideas around technical implementations and requirements, and so having to deal with a lot of that sort of stuff makes my job really interesting and fun. So this talk will be a bit of a case study of Spectrum, but everything that I do is super unique to Spectrum, and I didn't want it to be super hyper-focused on some crazy edge use cases. But I would say that we have some great documentation on spectrum.adobe.com, so if you have any interest in design systems, we really try hard to document everything that we're doing. It's all open source, and that's a phenomenal position to be in, because I can talk about everything that I do. There's nothing that I do that's in any way secret. And what's fun about that is Microsoft, the Fluent team, my counterpart at Fluent, reach out to me, and they're also all open source, and so we get to collaborate. And same thing with Primer and primitives at GitHub. So if you're doing anything in the design system space, I'd love to talk to you about open source and how you could get into that. If you want to chat with me and you can't find time, I'm on social media, the medias, at GarthDB, so you can find me there. My current hyper-focuses, if you want to chat about them, we won't have time in this talk to go through it, but I'm really interested in anonymous tokens, name objects, cross-platform object serialization, super nerdy stuff, but I think there's some really interesting implementation ideas here. Design data beyond design tokens, including component anatomy and options, and trying to codify that, and then semantic versioning of designs. So if you're at all interested in any of those things, stop and take a second to chat with me. I'm not going to be too mad at Ben, but he said codify. I'd prefer the pronunciation codify. So I really like this term. I do enjoy coding, me personally. I think it's a great design tool to code. But that's not what I mean when I'm talking about codifying design decisions. Here's a definition I like. Arranging into a systematic code. I really like the idea of like shepherding a system together. And this one's actually the one I really like, reducing to a code. So trying to grab our design decisions, all these things that we're so thoughtful about and intentional about, and figuring out a way to reduce it to a code. There's a lot of pressure in an organization that grows in complexity to make things more complex. There's not enough pressure and incentive to bring down the complexity. So I love this term. And some related terms or synonyms would be collect, systemize, communicate. And these are actually fantastic steps for working through a codification system of your design decisions. So I want to step through an example of how we've done this sort of process at Adobe with something that we're currently actively working on right now. But before I do, I want to talk about the benefits of trying to like bring this codification process into your workflow. So first, efficiency. If we do not just record our design decisions, we will repeat them. And if you're not sharing them with teams, individual teams are going to do the same work. And so trying to codify it will very much reduce the need to be doing things independent and separate. Also, if we are doing a good job of describing our design decisions, it makes it a lot easier for teams who are coming after us to understand the logic that went into our decisions and scale those to the next decisions, the next edge cases that we didn't even think of. So it's very important that we figure out a way to codify this. And then consistency. Again, if we're not describing and telling people about it, they're not going to use it in their products, and then you end up with stuff like 12 different sliders in a single product that look all different. Not that Adobe's ever done anything like that. And I don't usually spell out word for word something here, but I want to be really explicit here. The aim of efficiency is not to reduce or de-skill design or engineering roles. The goal is not to do more with less people. The goal is to free up designers and engineers to focus on honing their craft and improving their products, letting designers and engineers do what they are good at and what they enjoy doing, and spend less time doing the things they hate. So, if your goal in software development is to maximize profit by underpaying and overworking designers, you should consider a different industry. Maybe private capital or something, I don't know. I'm all for being exclusive, but I've seen too many talented people get burnt out because they're overworked and underappreciated. So, all right. So, let's take a look at some design decisions that we've been making recently in Spectrum. And the case study I'm going through is corner rounding. When you're dealing with something as complex as Spectrum, even something as simple as corner rounding takes a lot of thought. So Spectrum 1 right now, if you go and look at our design system, these are the 3 values that are allowed in our design system for corner rounding. You've got 2, 4, and 8 pixels. There are mobile equivalents. This is the desktop value. And then we have a Spectrum Express, which is like a sibling design system. We're not going to get into that complexity. We're just going to go with straight Spectrum. If you look at our documentation for the website, you'll see that we only describe how to use 2 of those corner roundings. We don't even describe the 3rd one. And it kind of says, hey, you use the big one for normal components, and then for really small components, you use the small one. And that's all the advice and help that we give. So right now, we're working on Spectrum 2, which is the next major version. It is a construct, right? Versioning is just a construct. It doesn't mean anything other than to describe what we want it to mean. So we've started working on Spectrum 2 this year, and it gives us a chance to rethink things, even small, really minute parts of our system, like corner rounding. So we're going through this process: collect, systemize, and communicate. First, because we are a large system, and we're used across a lot of products. We have very good adoption at Adobe. I'm very happy with the progress that we've made. And if you're interested in those discussions, we can talk. But because of that, we have a lot of existing data to go off of. I know the paths that people are walking through the grass, so we can see where to put the sidewalks. So the first step was to do a lot of user research, and our users are weird because our users are actually product designers. And Lynn Howe and Matt Davey are two of our designers on Spectrum, and they put together a lot of this work kind of consolidating these different use cases. So we've got the same thing here, default and small, also full, but it's not too descriptive. But then they go into describing the way that you would use these different things, and different size capacities and containers and nesting. And then we've got t-shirt-sized components, like this action button. We have a small, medium, large, and extra large action button, and they all have different corner roundings, which before, if you just had those two values, if you were changing the size of the component, the corner roundings wouldn't change with that. And so here, it's got a little bit more personality even as you scale up some of these things. And then you can see, here's a great example of the nesting. You've got the corner rounding on the checkbox, the card, the dialogue, all next to this full rounding on this pill button. So we got to collect all those use cases. The next step is then to reduce that into a system. What's really nice is you get to kind of see the paths that you're taking with some of these decisions. You then have to figure out how to describe when and how to use those different decisions that you've made. You cannot just say you need to do it this way because it looks right. You have to give more than it looks right. So why would someone use one corner rounding over the other? And we got our nested corner rounding with an actual system. We've got a calculation. This is something our designers put together. So it's all calculated out, and you can figure out exactly how you would nest things and how they would work together, and why we have different values even. The last step is then trying to figure out how to communicate all of this. And this is the hardest step. Codifying your design decisions into documentation. Documentation works really well, except for the fact that it's really hard to read and it's really hard to write. If it wasn't for those two things, documentation would be perfect. But because it's tough, we try to augment our documentation from our website to also use Figma files that describe these things as best we can. This is a great example of that. But then we also have design tokens. And design tokens are name value pairs. They're JSON. We use some really interesting tools. There's some great tools out there for managing design tokens. I'd recommend Diaz, at least looking into it, in Style Dictionary. And the W3C group has a design token group. So if you're interested in trying to actually literally codify your design decisions into code, design tokens are the way to go. And what we're trying to do here is we have 3 layers of design tokens. We've got our global tokens that actually reduces the number of corner roundings that we have total in the system. So you can see here the values. We don't have just every single integer that you can go pick from to do our corner roundings. We have a restricted set. But right here, the corner roundings, the corner radiuses with number indexes, that's not very descriptive of how to use them. So we have these alias tokens that really are just adding an additional name onto the same thing. And they're just trying to provide more context as to how you would go about using it. And you can see here, this is corner radius small, so meaning it's the small size radius for small size components, but then it has size small for the small version of the checkbox. That's not a great name. If you say, oh yeah, it's just so intuitive, you should be using quarter radius, small size, small. And that's coming after lots of debate and discussion. That was the best we came up with at that point. So there's one last step that I would add, which is improve. Your design system or your communication or your codification of design, however you're doing that, it's never going to be done. That was my favorite. When design systems were kind of first out, people would be like, all right, and after we get done with the design system, then we can get back to working on our product. Your designs are never done because the products are never done because things are always changing and you have to adapt. So however you're going to be communicating to your designers and to your engineers, you're going to have to change not only your process, but also the decisions that you made themselves. So by show of hands, how many of you feel like you're doing something like this at your company, on your product, on your team, or in your personal life? Right? What you actually have control over. Do you ever go back to design decisions that you made and try to figure out why you made that decision? Yeah. So it's a discipline, trying to do this, and no one's going to thank you for it until they need it. Right? Up until they need it, it's useless time spent on it. But as soon as you need it, it retroactively makes it all worth it. So I would recommend, if you can, applying pressure to give yourself the space to do these sorts of things. And then, when you go to your next one-on-one, your next quarterly review, your next job interview, you're able to say, I made these decisions at this company on this product for this reason. And you can actually keep track of that stuff. It's also really nice for managing. Like my own imposter syndrome, being able to be like, no, I did accomplish things. We did make decisions. We're not just going in circles. All right, so 3 years ago, I spoke at Front. My talk was how to establish and maintain a design system. And I'm sure you all were there and you loved it. It was your favorite. In my presentation, I had this slide. I was trying to figure out how to define a design system, because if you ask everybody, they'll give you different definitions. But to me, this is the definition of a design system, which really is just collecting the decisions that you're making and consolidating them and reconciling new things and adapting the system to it as you get them. So it's the same thing. The codification of design decisions is a design system. So if you are trying to collect your design decisions, if you're trying to be consistent across products, you have a design system. You're a design system designer, you're a design system engineer. This isn't some magical thing that someone comes down and makes you a real bunny, like the Velveteen Rabbit. You're doing it. It may not be what you want it to be, it may not be final. It may still feel very rough to you, and you may not feel like you're doing it like the big teams or the big systems or in the way that you want to. Just be patient with it and keep pushing. If you're doing this as a designer, if you're trying anything like this, then you're doing good work and you're working towards a design system. It is a design system. And if you're doing anything like this as an engineer, same thing. There's a lot of design system engineers out there who think they're just making component libraries and they don't think they're using a design system. You're doing it. But this should be the goal of all the work that we're trying to do with our codification of design. It's communication, it's collaboration, it's trying to work between the teams, but it's trying to share code. And by code, I mean codified design decisions and literal code that is shared between implementations and products. And we're sharing values, meaning the ideas and the basis for our decisions that we're making in our designs, trying to share that and have the same values with our engineers and our product implementations, but also literally sharing values, like 2 pixels for a corner rounding. It should be the same value for the same reason across the whole system and across all the products. One more, and then sharing systems. We should be sharing with each other, designers and engineers, describing how we work, how our processes work, why we work that way, and trying to understand the other side and why they're working that way as well. So, I appreciate you for being part of the community and for coming on a Monday. If you have any questions and you want to reach out to me, I would love to chat through stuff. If you want to get into design systems, if you're pushing really hard and you don't know how to sell design systems at your company, or even just improving your process for trying to collect and codify design decisions, I'd love to chat with you about it. So ping me on social media. Also, I'm trying to be here all day today and tomorrow. I have some stickers. That one is the favorite. It's a good accessibility. I've had this sticker on my laptop for a long time. I so appreciate that you guys are laughing because there's so many people, my kids don't understand it. I've explained it to them 3 times. I don't even think they know the product that it's making fun of. But and this is also a website. I'm trying to help. There's a lot of great resources for designers who are working on design systems. Dan Mall, Brad Frost. They're doing a great job of talking to designers. Curtis, what's his name? Dustin? Curtis? I don't know. 8Shapes guy. So there's lots of great designers who are doing a really good job of describing that to designers. There's a lot of engineers, again, who are pretending like they don't work on a design system. So I'm trying to help kind of collect resources for that. So if you have any engineers here in this room or that you work with who would be interested in doing design system stuff, that is the URL. It's designsystems.engineer. So we're trying to kind of build that community a little bit. But yeah, that's my talk. Thank you.
Awesome. Hey, Garth, come take a
side.
seat.
I would really like a drink.
Grab some water. Hey, let's give one more round of applause for Garth. He went first. Come on. Yeah, great job. Always tough to go first.
This is the new Figma slides.
You did it in Figma slides?
Yeah, it came out on Friday. They announced it. Thursday announced it.
So is it Flides or?
No, we're not.
Figlides?
I don't speak for them. But
oh, okay.
Can I sit? Is that all right?
Yeah, please have a seat.
But it worked in production. If anyone's curious and wants to use it.
That's great. Awesome. Yeah. Hot off the press. What was like 2 days ago?
Yeah.
And you just decided to. Did you build your slides in something else, and then you're like, oh yeah, Figma came out with slides, so I'm going to redo my entire deck?
Yep. Actually, what was nice is we do decks in Figma. Our design system is codified in Figma. We use Token Studio, which is a plugin for Figma. And so what I was really going for is I've been trying to do this forever. I was doing it in Keynote for a long time, where I was trying to grab the values from our design system and use it in the presentation. And then there's no syncing tool for that, so it's a lot of manual labor. So Figma, I'm like, if we can get this Figma thing to work, I've already got my design values in here from our design system. Really the best design management system I'd ever seen is InDesign. It is absolutely phenomenal. It just happens to be only for print, so not very useful for most people.
How many print designers do we have out there? There you go.
Yeah.
We've got like 3.
I got Pantone shoes. We were talking about it backstage. It's really a print thing.
Awesome. What color is that?
So it was the color of the year, I think, a couple years ago, and it's Viva Magenta.
You don't know the actual number, though?
No. 200. There you go. Sounds good.
There you go. Right on. All right, we got some questions for you.
Yeah.
Although I might want to kick one off, if that's okay.
Yeah, shoot.
Backstage, we were talking about how you came to Adobe, you were a designer.
Yeah.
And then you transitioned into an engineer.
Yeah, so at Adobe, I was hired. I worked for Dan at Rain, so an agency in Lehigh, and we were doing Flex and Adobe Flash Platform stuff. And so I was heavy on the engineering side, tried to get more into UX, and so I got hired at Adobe as the UX designer for the default components for Flex 4. Yeah. So design system stuff. Like a lot of people have been doing design system things long before we ever called them design systems. But we were building components that were consistent and codified and descriptive across the whole platform. But I noticed at Adobe, we've done several design systems, and they just collapse under their own weight. It's just really hard to get large-scale design decisions agreed upon and accepted and used. And the big magic that we've kind of stumbled across with Spectrum is that we're not trying to enforce it, and we're not the police. We're not the Spectrum police going around telling people how they're doing it wrong. We're spending a lot of time asking people what they're doing, what they're trying to achieve, and why what we've done so far isn't working and why they need to extend it, and then teaching them and helping them to do it on their own. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, we got a question from the audience. Thank you, everyone, for putting questions in the Slack channel. If you're not in Slack, please go in there, and I'll try and guide you to each of the talks, the different channels to ask those questions throughout the day. But we got a question here from Mitchell. When Adobe acquires another company with a separate design system and front-end technology, what is the process like for migrating them to Spectrum? And then there's 2 follow-up questions.
Yeah, so that's a really great question. We just had this stuff sort of happen with a lot of the 3D applications that came, and they're fantastic. Substance Painter, amazing applications, but they're on a totally different platform. They're using Qt or Qt, which is a nice open source platform for desktop UI. But there isn't a Spectrum implementation of that. So the first step was not telling them what to do. Was being like, hey, we have Spectrum. Spectrum's a thing, and we have all these resources for you. And what's kind of funny is I feel like there's some products that are like hoping to get acquired by Adobe. They start to look a little bit more like Spectrum. I don't know if that's intentional or not. But we're all very open about our design system, and so yeah, people can go and look at it. We have our tokens are public and open source, and we have a token visualizer. So when one of the engineers or one of the designers was like, hey, we want to start using Spectrum values, actual code in our implementation, I just pointed them at it, and I said, here's our documentation. And they had probably 3 or 4 follow-up questions in the last year. So that feels like a huge success of like, I haven't had to sit there and handhold them and describe every single part. We've done a decent job. We're not done, and I've got more I want to do. But we've done a decent job to this point of describing what we've done and why, to the point where it's almost self-serve. So it's been very nice.
So who makes the decisions around all of that? Is it you?
Do. Yeah. So like we don't. Are you talking about like decisions on when to use Spectrum?
When you acquire them and they're coming in, like who makes the decisions that like, yeah, this is how everything goes. This is how we fix it. This is how you roll it out.
So they do.
They do.
Yeah,
it's all up to them.
It's all up to them. Like there's definitely going to be pressure to look more like the rest of the products, but that's not pressure that we apply to them. We are just there inviting. We'll have people who will pop up and they'll be like, I really want a Tailwind version of Spectrum. We're like, that's great. You shouldn't build one because it's going to take a lot of work, but if you want to, here you go. And they'll be like, I want Bootstrap version of Spectrum. We're like, please don't. But here you go. We definitely don't try and stop anybody else.
Okay.
Are we running out of time?
No.
Oh.
I was looking.
They're changing it on us.
It's like we've got 0 minutes. That's good.
1 minute, 2, 3, 4.
3, 4,
Yep.
7. All right. If they're all in, they're like, yeah, gangbusters, we want to do this because they love it so much. How long does that take?
It depends on the product. If you're a web product, if you're React, so this is the other thing, even fragmentation within the web space.
Right.
We have React, and then you have products who are like, I can't use React because it's too heavy. Right off the bat, just the size of React is enormous. And so we have Spectrum Web Components, which is a different flavor of a JavaScript implementation. They can actually be used together. But if you're coming in and you're already a React product, you can grab React Spectrum and start using it right away. So those sorts of changes. Also, we try to individually version and release components so that you can grab them a la carte, and you can actually grab different versions so you can update components on a per component basis. There's some system-wide changes that doesn't work well with typography and things like that, but outside of that, you can kind of stay versioned on an individual component basis.
Cool. All right, from Stephanie, how would you advocate to leadership to start a design system when they have been historically resistant to the project?
So wearing them down, and
just every day, email.
Just kind of waiting them out. And you don't need permission to do things in a systemized way. All right, so you can work in a systematic, systemized, all those words. You can work in those ways without permission. You can do it in your own files. You can figure out what your domain of influence and control is, and you can do it with yourself. You can improve your own craft. You can then, so it's a large persuasion campaign and getting other people on board, and you'll find that those skills transfer to your next job where you actually find a team that does want you to do it. But I've also seen leadership change, and that's how they get the design system. I've also seen leadership change their minds, and that's how a design system. It really does help when leadership's on board. They're never going to fully understand it until we talk it through with them and they see the benefits. The points of benefits that are really easy to go for are accessibility. Talk to them about the Domino's Supreme Court case where Domino's got hit because their website was not accessible as a product. And their argument was, well, they can just come into the store. And the Supreme Court is like, nope, that's not an option. So it's a liability. Oh, that's a great word too. If you want to get buy-in from leadership, it's a liability to not have accessible products. And if you are building in a systemized way, if you make one component accessible, that propagates out. And so you're saving a ton of resources by allowing people to not have to worry as much about accessibility because it's being handled from a foundation core level. And then internationalization, if you ever get into it. And then growth in general. Most design systems start out on the web, and then iOS or Android or any native implementations, they're like, good luck to you. You can't use our design system. We're not trying to share our code with you. And so it's really easy for those things to be out of sync and that feel like it's amateur hour because these products don't look like they belong together. So those sorts of things are good arguments for it, but it's a slow persuasion.
Awesome. For me, it was find out what your leadership likes in terms of one of those.
Yeah.
And just go after it.
Hammer it.
Hammer it. Just go in, all in. Yeah. All cards on the table.
Yeah.
That works the best. All right. From our fearless leader, Ben, how do you build a culture around this method of codifying designs when you have a team where there isn't a dedicated design system team?
So no design systems team starts from scratch as, not that I know of, as like, hey, we've got headcount. Here's 3 people full-time working on the design system. It's always, you've got these 3 people who have been doing it in the off hours and on the side and squeezing it in wherever they can because they care. And eventually it gets turned into I'm allowing you to work on this full-time. Sorry. But that question of culture, if Andy is here, I think. Andy and I used to have long discussions about culture. Culture is not a thing. Culture just means the people that you hire. So whoever is there is the culture, with the additional layer of what leadership cares about. So what leadership cares about and what they communicate is what will grow out of the people that they hire. So as far as like, what if your culture doesn't fit? That's not a thing. Like, it doesn't fit because the people don't want to do it. But you're not trying to build a design system for some other team. You're trying to build a design system for your problems. So you're already building a design system, whether you have one intentionally or not. You either have an intentional design system or you have an accidental one. So if you want to be more intentional about it, then it's going to be, again, a persuasion campaign that you're trying to like encourage people to work in the same way. That oftentimes means you have to do things in a way that you don't like, and you have to do it in a way that they like. It's more important to be working together than it is to be right. And that's awful. But that's collaboration.
So just start it yourself.
Yes.
Don't wait for permission.
Don't wait for permission. Don't tell anyone until someone says we need one of those and you said, I've been doing it for years.
Done, been there, done that. Yeah, love it. All right, from Abigail. What's the most challenging step in the codification process? And what advice do you have to work through that?
So the most challenging step is other people using it. It's really nice to codify your designs when no one else is reading your stuff or caring. It's awful when they start to read it and they're like pointing out all your mistakes and all the things that seem inconsistent, like corner rounding small, size small. That made perfect sense in our heads when we were deciding it. And then someone's like, what the heck does this mean? And I'm like, oh, that's that's a fair point. That means nothing. So that sort of stuff happens all the time. And it's just, it's all about being willing to adjust and spending time understanding the other side. Our engineers kept asking, why would you keep doing design changes? It makes a lot of work for us. The point of design is to change. The point of design is to improve, to find where our users are and to move towards that, to help enable them to do the best that they can. And the point of a design system is to change and have the least amount of impact on products. But it will have a lot of impact. So you have to understand that when you change the name of a variant of a component or an option, you just made a breaking change for all of your products that are using that component. And that's going to take time on them, and they're getting no benefit out of it. It's not like the end user knows that it used to be called a drop-down, and now it's called a select. Your end user doesn't care. But if you're trying to improve the system and to make it more coherent and consistent, you have to put in that work, and you have to persuade the engineers that it's worth making those changes. But you have to be aware that that's going to take time, too. So.
All right, we got a little less than 30 seconds left.
Yeah.
Last question. I'm from Scott. I'm really curious to hear when the Spectrum team switched from XD to Figma.
So you can see in our files, we have XD files for Spectrum 1. They're all published on the website, and we're currently working on Spectrum 2. Figma is not currently public, our Figma assets, because we're working on Spectrum 2 in beta, and I'm working hard to persuade them to not wait for perfect, but to go public before then. But I would say that most of our assets changed over, I don't know, about a year ago-ish. So, and we can talk about reasons why, but yeah.
Well, head over to Slack in your own channel and answer any additional questions we didn't get to. But Garth, thank you so much for kicking us off, and thanks for being here. Let's give him one more round of applause.
Thanks.
Let's have this one.